All right, well, thank you. So this is our first monthly SISMA call of 2025, and we've got a great lineup for this year, and I'm really excited about what we have today to kick off. So this monthly webinar series is hosted by the Florida Invasive Species Council's Partnership Assistance and Communications Committee, or FISC-PAC, and we help try to support a lot of the amazing work that's done by our cooperative invasive species management areas, or SISMAs, all across the state. So for today's presentation, we'll hear about an EDDMapS overview and their really interesting range shifting tools from Chuck Bargeron. Then we'll get an update on the North Central Florida SISMA, as well as FISP and SISMA statewide updates. So for today's presentation, Chuck is the director of the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health at the University of Georgia. Chuck has been with UGA for 25 years, during which time his work has focused on invasive species and information technology. He is the former chair of the National Invasive Species Advisory Council and former president of NASMA. Chuck has been an invited speaker at over 400 regional and national conferences and co-authored over 67 journal articles and outreach publications. And I will go ahead and hand this over to him for our feature presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, here we go. I apologize, y'all. It's taking me a second. I'm doing it from my laptop.
And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go through the presentation, and we will address them after Chuck's finished.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm going to kind of do an overview of EDDMapS, and I'll go through that pretty quickly, and then talk about some of the new tools that we've done to incorporate different models that other people have developed, but into EDDMapS to make them as accessible and easy to find as possible. So I'm the director of the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. I'm actually located in Tifton, Georgia, which is about an hour north of the Florida line. And our center is a partnership between the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences and the School of Forestry and Natural Resources. And unlike a lot of university centers, we are just focused on outreach. So we don't do traditional research. We don't do teaching. We just do a lot of outreach and really building information technology tools to kind of help solve problems. And so when I'm thinking about what we kind of do at the center, we do some training, we do some research on how to solve problems, but most of what we do are partnerships and building IT tools. We started out in the mid 90s, and we were collecting 35 millimeter slides and converting those slides into photo CDs. This was the beginning of PowerPoint being a thing, and this was a way to make that transition from slides into PowerPoint. We created a website later to host those pictures. It was forestry images. There's also an insect images, weed images, IPM images, and invasive.org that are all part of the different interfaces into this image system. The interface for that has changed over time, and we've just launched a brand new version of the Forestry Images website at the beginning of this year, and this new style and new interface is going to transfer over to the other image sites as well. As we were collecting the pictures and as we were working on building information about invasive species, we started working with Jim Miller out of the Forest Service in Auburn, and he had this publication he was working on. It was Invasive Plants of Southern Forest. And we took this publication and made it available online long before the printed book was published. But we kept running into an issue. We expanded that to the whole Eastern United States and later to the full United States, but we kept running into this problem where there was not good distribution information for most of the invasive species, plants particularly, that we were focused on. Here, for example, is the distribution map of honeysuckle in Georgia. And if anybody knows anything about honeysuckle, it's found everywhere. So this was from USDA plants database, but obviously just not accurate because people had not taken the time to document honeysuckle in all the counties. We took a look at what was going on in other parts of the country. The invasive plant atlas in New England was growing strong. The North America Weed Management Association, now NASMA, had created an invasive plant mapping standard, and Google and Yahoo have both released a way to overlay points onto a map. And so we took all of these pieces, and as well as pulling together data, aggregating data from all over the country and all different databases, pulled all this into one place in an attempt to make something that would be very easy for users to report invasive species and also find out what their distribution is. But we still kind of had this struggle where, to go out and collect data, you really need a GPS and a camera, and then you'd write it down on a sheet of paper, and then you'd go back in and enter it on the web. But when the iPhone came out, and other smartphones, that really helped solve that problem. We were able to build apps. The first one being the I've Got One app in Florida, which has now been downloaded a lot more times than this slide indicates, and a lot more reports as well. But that was the first app that we did for invasive species, and it was funded as part of a Park Service project focused on pythons. But we said, why just limit it to pythons? Let's make this app report anything and go into this EDDMapS system that we had built over the last few years prior to that. And we kind of continued that trend across the U.S. and built a lot of regional programs and apps, just because at that point we didn't have all the tools in place to be able to dynamically download a species list. So you wanted the species list to kind of fit for the area of the country you were in. So we worked with a lot of different organizations to build these different apps. And we continued to expand. This was a density map at one point of where data was in the US. We continued to expand EDDMapS into other parts of the country and expand where we were collecting data. Utah and Montana came to us, and here's some of the partners, and they said, we need a way to really manage this data going forward. And we've got a lot of areas that are offline, that we don't have good cellular coverage, and we need a way to be able to monitor what we're doing and update the records in real time, or at least, same day kind of situation where we could keep, the work we're doing and change the map from just being a whole bunch of red points into showing the progress that we're making with treatments, and ultimately eradicating populations. And so we worked with them, built this tool that was EDDMapS Pro. And now the story that EDDMapS is telling is not just where the distribution of these species are, but where work is being done on the species. And so into EDDMapS, we built a concept of revisits, where you could go on to the EDDMapS Pro app or onto the website, click on a population, and update the information about that population. And I think this has really been a game changer in improving EDDMapS and its functionality and usability for our users. So if you look at EDDMapS today, we're almost 20 years old. It was 2005, 2006 when EDDMapS was created and launched. We're collecting invasive species data, biocontrol data, as well as some agricultural and forest pest data, and really trying to build these tools that work at the national level down to a SISMA level. And we've really made a difference in terms of what we know about invasive species now and their distribution. I always get the question, and so I try to include this when I'm talking about EDDMapS, of what kind of data do you want? And my answer used to be, well, what kind of data would be useful to you when you want to use it on the other side? But that doesn't always work. So I came up with this and said, it's really what, when, where, how much, how'd you find it, who found it, and why do you think it was there? And so those simple questions, answering that when you're filling out the form, really puts the context behind what you're reporting. And we've tried to look at the process of early detection and rapid response and what is needed at each step, and then build tools to fit around that. And that's where the verification comes in through EDDMapS, as well as linking to out to different options and really trying to predict what's coming in the future. We've also tried to make the EDDMapS data as accessible as possible and reusable where it can be used to create other tools. And when we look at the models in a few minutes, that was really the strength, because the people doing the modeling were able to get data from EDDMapS, then use it, create a product, and then us integrate that product back into EDDMapS. We've also tried to create different tools for different levels of users, whether that's a casual user using the EDDMapS app or website, or the public who maybe needs to go to the I've Got One app, WildSpot, or even if they just report it through iNaturalist, we're able to pull it into EDDMapS and not lose that information, all the way up to, like I was talking about, EDDMapS Pro. So here's a current EDDMapS website. It kind of two panes scrolling down on the page. We've really tried to incorporate the tools available very easily and obviously on the home page, and that's all of these features now are hot to taking you to the different features within EDDMapS. The report form has not changed much over time, but we continue to do some improvements and some error checking to it in order to just make it continue to adapt and be easier to use for the user. We've consolidated a lot of those regional apps we created into the EDDMapS app and EDDMapS Pro. The EDDMapS app, when you download it now, you choose where you're at, what state, your province in Canada you're in, and then it tailors the species list to what you chose. And here's kind of a look at where we have data now covering US and in Canada. All of this is possible because we've worked with a lot of different organizations who's helped to support this in either a very small way or a very large way over the last 20 years. We have some core functionality that the Forest Service helps us support along with the University of Georgia. And then we always have folks come to us and say, but can we do this? How do we do this? Can we improve this? And so our take on that is we always say, yes, if it's above and beyond what we're doing, we'll be glad to help you with it, but let's make this feature available to the larger EDDMapS community when we do it. So let's not just build it for the state of Washington where only people in Washington can use it. Let's build it and make it part of the bigger program. So we've tried to, keep things going. I mentioned partnerships at the beginning. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. When we talk about this, and hopefully when y'all talk about this to your partners, there's a lot of benefits of early detection and rapid response, but one of the most important ones is using it as an educational tool to help train the person, both why it was important that they reported what they reported, but also, that by doing this, and here's the problem with invasive species, and here's what can be followed up on from there. Some quick stats, and I'm going to kind of go through this quickly, but last year we had about 200,000 reports added nationwide for EDDMapS. That's from about 5,500 reporters. We averaged 500 and something reports a day. Here's where the data was coming in last year. Some of these big counties make it, confuse the data a little bit, but I like seeing the spread across the US and in Canada. Most of the reports are still positive. We do have some fair amount of negative data for some trapping projects coming in. We also are still getting a lot of data from web reports, but then about 27% are coming from smartphones, and then 26% are coming from other data sources. EDDMapS is still majority plants. We have seen insects continue to expand in terms of what data we're getting into EDDMapS, and then wildlife is also a part. A lot of that is more focused in Florida just because we try to work with our partners at USGS for aquatic animals, and so kind of let them handle that in a lot of cases. And so it's more of looking at the terrestrial animals. Florida still has the most reports in EDDMapS. I think we're close to 8 million now, and maybe a tenth of those are in Florida. 98% of all the data that's been submitted to EDDMapS has been verified. And what's interesting, when you look at what has not been verified, a big chunk of that is a data set from a system in Michigan where they don't verify it before when it goes into their database, but so we want somebody to verify it before we release it in EDDMapS. There are some data for Florida that still needs to be verified as well, and maybe this will be an opportunity for you as a SISMA lead to volunteer to come on and help verify some of that data. We have a network of 980 verifiers. Some are obviously more active than others. So here's what I think is the cool part. So what difference have we made, and what are you able to do with this data? So I'm gonna go through. I chose some species that, and some are more important to Florida, some are more just kind of southeastern species, but just looking at, um, and most all these will have four-ish different maps. The first one is what we knew about the distribution of that species when we really launched EDDMapS in the 2006 time frame. What we know about the distribution now, and then what with some of these range models are we able to predict where these species will be, and so that's what these maps will be. I'll kind of talk about them as I go through it. So start off with alligator weed. Here's where we knew alligator weed was as of 2006. Here's what the distribution looks like now. So if you see that difference and that change, and then when you start looking, um, some of the species we have were just modeled, just the terrestrial species were modeled, and then a new project was able to model based on habitat and abundance. And so here's what a potential map of alligator weed could look like. And I'll show you in a second, but you can go in, and if you understand modeling, and probably some of you do better than I do, you can go in and read more about each one of these different model data sets, and I'll show you where those links are. So water hyacinth, here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now, and then here's what that habitat abundance model looks like. Hydrilla, here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now. And obviously some of this is spread, some of this is just we have more information than we previously did. All right, so looking at the terrestrial plants where we have this data showing the range shifts based on climate data. As you can see with the key right here, you've got where it was found, where the orange is kind of the expansion, and then the purple, the darker purple, is the retraction. So, and you'll see two different maps using these colors as I go through these species. One is the more conservative view, and one is the more liberal view in terms of how many different models have to agree before it shows that change. And so and to get to any of these, when you go to maps and you choose a species, and if you choose county, then you're given an option of all these maps here if they are available for that species. So for garlic mustard, in this example, you've got the distribution map. There's also a record density map. There's a map showing the difference between what like Plants Database and BONAP know from a literature standpoint and what we have observations for. And then there's the future range map, the future certainty map, the future abundance habitat map, and then a link out to the Inhabit tool, which is just another tool that USGS runs out of Fort Collins, and so we worked with them just to make it easy for you to access their information as well. And then down here where this share button is, when you're looking at the maps, there's also these range maps. There's also an info button where you can go to it and pull out, have links to where the journal articles where they talk more detail about these models. All right, so let's look at garlic mustard. Here's what we knew of garlic mustard in 2006. Here's what we know now. And then here's what the range shift looks like. And again, this is kind of the using less models, and then this is using or this is the more, I guess you could say, where models have to agree more. And then here's where, the more possibility. And there is some data in some of this. You'll see like this point down here in Florida. I think that's a point that came from another data system other than EDDMapS that that they used when they were doing these maps. And that's why that point doesn't show up on the EDDMapS map, but it shows as a retraction on the model. And then here is that habitat, future habitat, abundance habitat map. And then here's what the distribution map looks on Inhabit. And I only included one Inhabit example, but I wanted you to know that's available, and more information about how they're doing modeling is available on their website. Tallow tree, here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now. And then here's what the different distribution projection range shift projections look like. And then here's the one for the habitat abundance one. Stilt grass, here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now. And then here's what the change is. And in this case, because it's more of a northern species coming down, that's why you see that larger retraction in there, depending on which set of models you use. And then here's that abundance habitat map. Giant reed, here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now. And then here, kind of filling in everywhere it hasn't been found if you look at the, what the predictions are for it. And then here's that abundance habitat model. Kogon grass, and this is a good example of why having and sharing data matters, and I'll show you in a second. So here's what we knew in 2006. Here's what we know now. And then here's what the models look like of what it could be. And then here's that abundance habitat map. And so because my only explanation I have for why this looks so weird for Georgia is because the points in Georgia are all on private land, and the Forestry Commission kind of has, doesn't share that beyond a county level for most all the points. And so I think that's what messed this up when they were doing the model, and why there's that gap that it looks like in Georgia, just based on that data source. Miscanthus, another more northern species. We didn't know a lot about it in 2006. That is filled in a fair amount. And then, with the prediction that it probably maybe not moving much more south, but definitely filling in a larger area based on climate change. Japanese climbing fern, here's 2006. Here's what we know now. Kind of a big jump on that one. And then looking at what the potential is with climate change, as well as the abundance one. Bittersweet, not a whole lot of points then, a lot larger spread now, but with a huge potential to spread from there. Air potato, kind of a Florida focused species that is spread outside of Florida, and then potentially could really spread up into the southeast a lot more. Knotweed, another northern species kind of coming south. We know a lot more about it than we did 20 years ago, and then looking at what the potential is for spread for it, as well as the abundance habitat. So that's just a sampling. There are 900 of those that were done of terrestrial weeds that are all available through EDDMapS. And I so please check those out, and I can, if you have very specific questions, I can point you to the people that did the modeling, so you can learn more about that. But we see what you can do when you have good data. We see what happens when the data is not as good. So what kinds of things do we need to do to make these maps better? And so one of the things we're working on is the Wild Spotter program. And I, for those of y'all familiar with how I've got one has been promoted in Florida, really Wild Spotter in a lot of ways is taking that I've got one model to the rest of the country with the focus on public lands. And so all the data goes from WildSpotter goes into EDDMapS, but it's just looking at things from a different way, marketing it to the outdoor recreation and kind of tourists visiting different parks, forest and wildlife refuges, as well as BLM lands. We started this with the Forest Service. We are expanding it in 2025 to include some national parks, wildlife refuges. We've expanded it to include all the BLM lands. So all BLM and all Forest Service are in there. We're starting on the parks and the wildlife refuges and working with different states kind of on an opportunity basis to include those states, state parks, state forest, that kind of information. Get that in there where you open the app, it shows you the wild places close to you. You can choose on one and then go report species in that wild place, which could be a park, forest, wildlife refuge, whatever. This is what we've been doing a training for the last, we did one in into 2023, and we're doing one in a couple of weeks. And just a good opportunity to learn more about the program and learn some of the social skills you need to kind of help build a community involvement type program. So very excited about the future for WildSpotter and how that data is going to be is fed, directly in the EDDMapS, using the EDDMapS verification system and giving an opportunity to really engage the public on reporting. I also think that technology is going to help us improve things. We saw how COVID really pushed dashboards to the forefront, and so we're starting to see a lot of dashboards both in EDDMapS and in tools our partners are building using the EDDMapS data to just better visualize information and change. Just a few of those. We're also looking at ways to incorporate drone photography into EDDMapS Pro. So, right now you can download the offline maps for a county. It's not very high resolution because the files are so big, because the area is so big. But if you were working in a very small area, and we can make it very easy for you to upload imagery of that area into EDDMapS Pro, then you would be able to go in and really have a lot more detail when you're out mapping that data. And here's just one we did as a test using some drone data. The other thing is cameras have really improved on our cell phones. And so, just the difference in this same picture from 2007 to 2021 and how much the color is better. And I think this will help us as we go forward, as these cameras get better, to be able to take better pictures, which will help with identification of new species when things are reported. Very soon we're going to have artificial intelligence built into the phones. They're already doing a fair amount of that, and that's one reason why we haven't really jumped on including, spending the time and resources on including AI and EDDMapS, because I think it's going to be built in to both the Google and the Apple phones very soon. So when you take a picture, it'll help with the identification and help you learn the species better and also get the species reported. Gamification, making things fun, making it where is very easy for the user to understand how they're benefiting the community, the environment with what they're doing. So building in these concept of badges, we've started some of this already as we launched our single sign-on program for EDDMapS and the Bugwood image systems. And so we're going to continue to improve that. There's some opportunities as Florida Invasive Species Council members and attendees to the conference to get some badges that can be added in. And just building the awareness, as boot brush stations go in different places, making sure that there's information about reporting. Alberta does this really cool thing where they give a wrestling belt to the person that reports the most reports each year into EDDMapS, and so that's just another way to help reward people at the state level, at the SISMA level, for taking the time, making the effort to report species. The first Asian giant hornet, northern giant hornet now record was reported through the Washington EDDMapS app, and I really like just the thing they did along with that. The whole see something, say something. That's used a lot in the Homeland Security world, but I think it's also important for the invasive species world for us to make sure that people know, hey, if you find something that looks unusual, take a picture of it, report it, because it may be really important. And that we saw that very recently with the cousin of the Asian giant hornet, yellow-legged hornet that was found outside of Savannah, and now it's been found in South Carolina as well. And I'm doing this to a Florida audience, but when I talk about how to do things right, I think what's happened over the years with I've Got One in Florida really is the poster child of how to do things right. Using consistent messaging for telephone number, for the website, for the app, and then making sure what FWC does a great job of is including that in press releases that are done. So it continues to put that message out there that, hey, if you see something, there's a couple of different ways you can report it, and please make sure you do. And at the end of the day, we need to not forget about what the goals are. The goals are not to create the best maps or the best visualizations of what the species, could look like with climate change. It's really to get control and hopefully eradication of some of these species. And so I think that gets lost sometimes, and so I want to make sure that we remember that as part of the process. That you're really trying to map it so you can go back and treat it, and then you can map it again and hopefully repeat that until you get to eradication. I want to thank my team at UGA, Rebecca Wallace, who's the EDDMapS coordinator, as well as the associate director, Joe LaForest, and our team of biologists and programmers that help make things happen behind the scenes. And so that is what I've got. I will be glad to answer any questions. If it gets very specific about the models, I'll have to get back with you on it. But I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time to talk about any questions y'all may have before you go to your next part of the call. And there's my email address if you want to email me as well.
Thank you very much, Chuck. That was a great presentation. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but I'll go ahead and start off with one real quickly. So I really like that kind of the map showing where you've got the range expansion and also that contraction aspect. I think that's something we'll see a bit more of here in Florida and could help us maybe even shorten some of our EDRR lists. I think I remember having seen in the past a way where you could get a list of species by county that might be new or leaving, as well as just the visual map. Is that still a product?
Yeah, I know that one of those products is there were some problems with it when we were testing some things on it, and so but being what we want to have, and there's some ways on the website where you can go on and see the reports by county, and so we've got some tool, and with the models there was a way to go in and kind of see what was projected for that area in a list kind of view. And I can send that link. I'm pretty sure it works. It's just there's some little bit of bugs with it, or some just kind of things where you sometimes you have to run it a certain way for it to work. But that was kind of based on the what was given to us. But that whole concept, and I don't really some people call it horizon scanning, but that's not what I think of as horizon scanning. But being able to say, okay, I want to know what's found in the counties around me, but not found in my county. We're definitely trying to get that as an easy way for you to get to that information through EDDMapS. And so stay tuned for that because those type features are going to continue to improve, and it's really just looking at it from a different perspective. One of the things we did add that is um, doesn't quite give you that, but I think actually some of the SISMA boundaries are in it, is there is a tool where you can view data by geographic location. And when you view data by geographic location, in a lot of cases, that's a city park, that's a state park, that's that information. But when you do that, you can also see a buffer of what's around it. And so that tool, which is browse by geographic location, I think is what it's called, really allows you to do some of those kind of things where you can see what is within a certain radius of a protected area, and you can browse that by county or search for it as well.
Very cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Go ahead, James.
Yeah. Hi, Chuck. Thanks for the update. It's always keen to know how you guys are progressing. It's great stuff. So over the years, how have you seen adoption and in terms of using the tool, reporting, etc.? And are there any ways to account for changes in behavior or use of the app to account for any kind of abundance issues? In other words, you didn't find it in 2006 because you didn't have a lot of users, but all of a sudden you're starting to find 2020, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have definitely seen so there are some areas, there are some states that EDDMapS is their database of record. And so because of that, there's a lot of people that's part of their job, they need to report things to EDDMapS, or they don't get a grant unless there's data in EDDMapS that they're doing. So for those states, it stays pretty consistent. I will say that I anecdotally, I've not seen that. I haven't ran the numbers, but I think the reports in Florida in terms of plants especially have dropped in the last 10 years, let's say, compared to where they were 10 years ago. And so I think that's where I think some of it is, the people on this call are different from the people that would have been on this call 10 years ago. And so when I did this presentation, when Deb asked me about doing this presentation, I said, okay, I want to start at the beginning because there's some folks that are probably going to be on here who have not seen me do an EDDMapS presentation before. And, we were doing these in-person trainings at a lot of the SISMAs when we were getting started with EDDMapS and getting started with the app. So there were a lot more people hearing about it from the plant side, especially on a more regular basis. And so there's probably a way you could analyze the data and do what you're talking about, but what I've seen is you'll get some champions who will go out and map a whole bunch of data, and then they'll move on to something else. And if there's not somebody that follows behind them, then you lose some of that. Or if you don't have the project from FWC where they're trying to map all the public lands within a 10-year period, obviously when that project ended, the amount of data that was available for EDDMapS to grab from somewhere went down. So, I think there's probably some definite of that, but I don't know that we've got the network of people reporting on a regular basis, that there would be very much where you could really see that in terms of a change based on less people reporting kind of situation.
Mhm.
Where
Yeah, I
well,
kind of
what's
noticed that
being found? Well, yeah, well, what's being found? I mean, I think that if we were getting 5,000 reports a day or 500 reports in Florida a day, then that would change that narrative a good bit, and you'd be able to do some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of noticed that with iNaturalist too, right? It's growing in popularity. So all of a sudden you'll see a spike in
Right.
numbers on a particular species. It doesn't mean it wasn't there 10 years prior. It just means
Right.
that people are now more active. It's anyways, very, very
Yeah, and that's where I think those maps showing, especially at the county level, the difference is interesting, because I don't think a lot of that spread. I think there's some of it that spread, but I think part of it is just we've assembled as much of the data as we could find.
Mhm.
There's still going to be lower populated areas that are going to have less data, and so how do we solve that, and how do we, and I think that's where SISMAs and local groups can really look at what's been reported and go, oh, well, I know that there's, a world climbing fern here that's just not on the map. Let's get that on the map so we
Mhm.
tell that story better.
Any other questions? If I have one more. If partners, like people on this call, state or local agencies wanted to get involved in the Wild Spotter and have some of their properties available to people using the app, what should they do?
Yeah, just reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with somebody in my group, and we can help get you set up depending on how many, there's a spreadsheet you could give us with all your properties on it. If it's a lot of properties, if it's only a handful, then we can walk you through how to set that up. And one thing I'll add to that is and also there'll be a training in 2026, and come to it too. But one thing that we've doing, and we're going to do again this year, is we've done an EDDMapS summit every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and all of those presentations, which go into a lot more detail than you can go into in 45 minutes or 30 minutes, are all on the EDDMapS website. And so, that'll be an opportunity. We will promote it through the Florida Invasives listserv when we do it. I think it's going to be in April. But we always try to make sure that we go into that more in deep depth of everything, and then make those presentations all available for anybody that want to watch it. So.
Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Chuck. If you do have questions, feel free to email him later on. Appreciate that. And we'll go ahead and hand it over to Lainey now to give us an update from the North Central Florida SISMA.
Okay, sorry. Helps if I unmute myself. Uh, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's see. There we go. All right. Hi, I'm Lainey Carter. I work for Florida Fish and Wildlife, and I'm a private lands biologist. So I'm also the co-chair of the North Central Florida SISMA. We cover a whopping 13 counties. We've also kind of adopted 2 or 3 additional counties that where we partner with other SISMAs, because we cover a wide span in our landowner assistance program. So landowner assistance program is housed within Florida Fish and Wildlife, so basically we have a small program within Florida Fish and Wildlife that is dedicated just to help private landowners. We cover 18 counties in North Central Florida. So some of those counties are not within our North Central Florida SISMA. So we've kind of adopted some of those just because we are doing work in those counties. So it makes sense for us just to kind of expand or use that as a partnership. So one of those big ones is Baker County, and another one is Putnam County. and soon to be possibly Marion County. So we might be working with some of those surrounding SISMAs to do some work days on private lands. So we've set it up to where we meet virtually on odd months and we meet in person on even months. That kind of works for us. We were kind of just meeting virtually, and we had more of a demand for meeting in person. So we've upped it up to meeting in person every other month, and sometimes even more than that if we do work days. We also have Melissa Griffin, who is awesome. She hosts work days once a month within our SISMA. So she kind of has this schedule she puts out and asks for volunteers to come out. This was the fall schedule. I was originally supposed to give this talk back in November, but then we had hurricanes, or it was September, then November. And now we're having snow days, so we are still at home. For some reason, it's just like natural disaster if you ask me to come talk for you. But we still have a goal to lead at least 2 work days on private lands per year, just because we do work with so many private landowners who need help. So it's easy for us to dedicate a day to call in our SISMA members to, let's do hack and squirt of some of these camphor trees that they have to kind of get a handle on that infestation that they might be dealing with, so they can then keep it in check themselves. It also helps that our co-chair is also a private landowner, so that's unique to our SISMA group. And I believe John Herbert is on this call. He's wonderful. And so moving on to the events that we've done last year, we hosted 2 feral hog workshops. So it's another thing we are really trying to talk more about is feral hog management. We have coming up next month, we're also doing another feral hog talk. We're having Dr. Hans Ellington come in and give a presentation on feral hogs down from ONA. They do a lot of work down there, IFIS, on feral hog management. So we also have had presentations from Christine Krebs, William Hinton, and Carson Torhorst, and Paul Evans. Just trying to grab a little bit from everywhere to bring information to our group. We've done grass identification workshops. That's also a big need or a big ask for our group. We're going to be doing another one probably in the fall. We table at just about every outreach event that we can. So North Florida Outdoor Expo is also coming up in February, where we'll be tabling there again. And then we also have the Flatwoods Fire Festival, which is an awesome event in February that we'll be tabling at. So any chance we get, we really try to get out there and spread the word about SISMAs, and not just specifically our SISMA, but SISMA in general and invasive species management. We've done a work day in Baker County. We also did a pretty cool hack and squirt work day in Gilchrist County in November. And then we had a workshop in November. The week after that one workshop, we had another workshop on herbicide where we had Dr. Enlow who came in and spoke for us. So we're really just trying to get out there and teach people about herbicide and what invasives they might be seeing. EDRR is another big thing for us. So we've put out flyers once a month. We're doing them once a month, just for people to see, like you might not think about old world climbing fern being in our SISMA, but it has been popping up. So that is definitely an EDRR species for us. And along with Brazilian pepper, like we're going to be using the I've Got One app as well to try to identify those locations. The biggest thing that we've been working on is building the private lands tool cache program. So this is an FWC-led program that we have feral hog traps. So we're building a trap share program for private landowners specifically, where we can, right now we have 12 traps. We will be purchasing more. This was a grant that we applied for back in January. And this grant was through Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida for 50 grand. And we are actually able to receive this grant to purchase herbicide for private landowners and the tools to spray that herbicide and hog traps. So it's been a year in the making now, and we're still kind of working on the paperwork and the logistics. But it's very exciting to say, okay, we have these tools. It is free for private landowners to use these things and check them out, just so we can kind of get a handle on these species within our SISMA, and potentially statewide. So if you want to know more about that program, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll have my information at the end of this presentation. This is just highlighting some of our partners that have helped made a lot of this happen. We really lean on our partners as much as we can, just to kind of get the word out or work with them on events. It's great to have access to all these people. This was just some photos from our feral hog management workshop that we did in February, and then again in August down in Ona, and then in June we invited some speakers in to come talk about feral hogs and diseases. Actually, back to that, we're going to be giving there's going to be another workshop that is not necessarily a SISMA workshop, but it will be talking about deer permits, deer depredation permits, and feral hog management on croplands and agricultural lands on Friday. And that event is going to be happening in Live Oak from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. if anybody is interested. We'll also be setting up hog traps again and doing demos. This is just some photos from a grass ID workshop, and some of the other events that we've done. Again, more outreach photos. And this is just a little bit about the Landowner Assistance Program. Anybody within the state is eligible if you own private land, even if you're leasing land. So if you're leasing land from like Rayonier or some of these timber companies, you're not excluded from this program. You can reach out to us. A biologist will come out to the property, talk to you about wildlife habitat management. It's like boots on the ground. We're there for you. We can write a management plan for you, or even just talk to you about, things that you could be doing to better the wildlife on the property, or identify invasive species that you might have and then tell you how to treat them. So all of this kind of is an umbrella for our program, for our SISMA. And that's pretty much all I have.
Wouldn't say pretty much all. That's a lot of amazing work that you guys are doing. And your program too with FWC. Very, very great stuff. Any questions for Lainey? All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will go ahead and wrap up with our statewide updates. Throw something in the chat and begin sharing. All right. So looking at our upcoming events in the next couple of weeks, we've got several work days, additional webinars and meetings. The link I threw in the chat is the Eventbrite for Osceola SISMA's annual herbicide use in natural areas workshop next week. I believe that's free with CEUs. Looking out a little bit farther into February, again, lots of great virtual meetings. I know this time of year, it can be, depending on where you're at, a bit cold for being outside or very nice to be outside. And also getting into some work days. But beyond just kind of the normal work days, of course, we have our weed wrangle and NESAL events that'll be coming up. And so we've already got several weed wrangle events planned all around the state. So lots of great work that our SISMAs are doing out there. I encourage you to try and make one of these events if you're close to it. And I am in the process of getting all the details added into the website that you'll see here. Hopefully that will be sometime this week. We'll have all those full details available for our 2025 Weed Wrangle events. As far as announcements, there's a scholarship if anyone's going to school or knows someone who's heading back. The Florida Vegetation Management Association has a scholarship that's available. The invasive plant tiered training curriculum program, we will be having our phase 1 meetings beginning next week. So if you're not already involved in that and would like to, contact me and I'll get you some information. And finally, wanted to share some job opportunities, make everyone's aware of several positions with the Croc Docks down in South Florida, and you can find those on their website. Looking at the rest of our 2025 call schedule, we've got, again, a myriad of great topics coming up. Next month, we'll look at potential climate change impacts to herbicide application and then continue on with lots of topics looking at both animal and plant and just general management questions overall through the rest of the year. All of our SISMA calls are recorded and hosted on our YouTube channel, and this one will be up in the next day or two. And so I want to thank everyone for making it out today. We're a little bit early, and so I hope the rest of your meetings for today end early as well. Thank you very much. Have a great week and stay warm out there.
Thanks, Deb. Take care. Thanks for hosting.